Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidil Mursaleen Nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ask Allah to give us the best of Iman, and that comes with the best of actions. And ask Allah to be pleased with us in the dunya and the akhirah, and that He doesn't humiliate us on the Day of Judgment. This is a book which we are talking about, the perfection and the foundations of this perfect religion, which is authored by Shaykh Muhammad bin Salih al-Uthaymeen, rahimahullah. And this book is very important because it helps us understand the difference between what Islam is and what a Muslim is. Because it's fortunate, the Muslim doesn't always portray the perfection of Islam. So this book is setting down those foundations for us to know what a Muslim should understand about his religion, and then practice that for himself. But if he doesn't, that doesn't detract from the perfection of the Islam, from the religion of Islam in the slightest. In actual fact, that would then show the imperfection of the Muslim. And this book also helps us understand the civilization that we live in right now, and the advancements that we have, whatever advancements that we have in the dunya. We have already seen most of them, if not all of them, are very Islamic values. So we've just looked at things which are similar to human rights, things which are similar to protection, things which are similar to increasing advancement, things which are similar in this religion also, which comes to give a purpose to the life that we live. But this book also highlights for us that we live in a world where there are different beliefs and different theories and different religions, etc. But there is one thing about the perfection of Islam which other religions cannot have, or do not have in totality, which is Iman. And Iman comprises of those 6 things that we've talked about before, and those things add to the perfection of this religion, because there's no other religion which will have that level of respect and honor in the unseen. And we've also looked at the book previously as part of the book, where the author was describing to us that Islam has come and it removed all forms of Jahiliyyah, and the perfection of Islam is here to stay until Yawm al-Qiyamah, until as long as Allah wills it to stay. Therefore, any kind of Jahiliyyah which comes in this ummah at any period of time after the coming of Muhammad ﷺ and the perfection of this religion, Islam has already removed it, or given us the ways to remove it. So when Islam came, when the Prophet ﷺ came, people had an aqeedah already. The people of Jahiliyyah had an aqeedah already, and the people of book already existed. But we find in that Jahiliyyah, we had people who had beliefs, but they didn't have the relevant actions. They didn't have the perfection in the actions. And then we had people who had actions, but they didn't really have any kind of belief. There was no stability in that. And this is what we're talking about, the people of the book. But the people of the pagans of Arabia also, they were even far worse than both of these. They had no ilm and they had no actions. And the society that the Prophet ﷺ came in was a very oppressive society, a very regressive society. And things were very bad at that time. And there wasn't any kind of stability in their lives. There wasn't any kind of stable authority. There was no stability in their iman or in their ilm or in their actions. And this is what Muhammad ﷺ came to eradicate. So this kind of Jahiliyyah, whatever situation you're in, you could be living in a society where they've got knowledge but they don't have values. Or you could be living in a society where they have values but they don't have knowledge. Or you could be living in a society where there are no values and there are no actions and there is no ilm. All 3 of those scenarios, the Prophet ﷺ was amongst that. Yet Islam came and showed us how to be perfect in every single one of those scenarios. So therefore, this shows us the stability of Islam. It shows us the perfection of Islam. It shows us the completion of this religion. And it actually even shows us the flexibility of this religion. And it shows us that this religion can function in any society. If you're a Muslim minority, a Muslim majority, if you're living amongst people who have, different beliefs, etc. But other religions can't tolerate that. And this is probably part of the reason why we're having so much, intolerance in the world and so much violence and so much oppression. So you go to certain countries where Muslims are being oppressed because the majority non-Muslim country don't know how to deal with it. But Islam would never do that. Islam would never ban humans alive. Islam would never take people's wealth unjustly. And the extent of oppression, only Allah knows about what is happening around the world. But this shows us the perfection of Islam, because Islam is a religion of justice, it's a religion of stability, it's a religion of knowledge, it's a religion of iman, it's a religion of working for the akhirah and being just and upright in the dunya. And we've looked at previously aqeedah, last lesson. We looked at worship and how Islam is a religion of perfection from those two aspects. And then we looked at economy and how it establishes justice and it removes any kind of oppression or any kind of transgression or any kind of overpowering over other people. Today, inshallah, we're going to look at the perfection of Islam in social life, how we should be inside of our homes, how we should be outside of our homes. And then the author finishes this book in talking about society and politics, the perfection of Islam in politics. And then he gives a brief conclusion as to why this religion is the religion of perfection, and you, the Muslim, belong to that religion, so you should feel glad that you're part of the religion, and he has advice for that also. Right, so now we're going to talk about social life. Now we have to remember, again, what was the context of the Prophet ﷺ when he came, and what was society like when he came. And briefly, we don't want to make this extensive, because remember, this book here was actually designed for higher education, so it would actually be a book that would be taught as part of a syllabus, and not over a period of 2 or 3 sessions in the mosque. It really needs to be expanded. And this is what we said in the very first session. I think it is something that needs to be done by the Tulab al-Ilm and the ulama, where they look at a book like this and they add bits to it, they author their own version, because this is a very good blueprint, and in an English language maybe we can translate it and apply it as much as we can to the society that we live in. But just to give a brief background of what the social life was like at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, people actually believed at that time that women were not human. There was an actual aqeedah at that time from the Jahiliyyah that women were jinn. They were not human. Others, and this is still found today, that women are the cause of all fitna, and this is a belief that exists in one of the religions, that all fitna that occurs is because of the presence of women. What's their evidence for that? Hawa. What did she do to Adam? This is what they claim. Adam was an upright man. He wasn't going to go near the tree, but his wife egged him on. This is the belief. May Allah protect us from such thoughts. This is what they believe. They believe that any kind of fitna that is happening in the dunya is because of women. There's another religion that believed at that time that women were actually impure. You shouldn't sleep with them, even if they're not on their menses, etc. And when they're on their menses, you shouldn't even talk to them. You're not even allowed to eat their food if they cook. This is their belief. This is what the time the Prophet ﷺ came. Some of them had beliefs that if you sleep with women, you have relations with women, then you must do it in a particular way, because if you don't do it in a particular way, the child will be born with a disability. These are just some of the ideas that people believed in. But the Prophet ﷺ came and he said all of that is nonsense. Islam is a religion of perfection. Allah has created the woman just as He's created the man. And Allah has created all of us upon the perfect way. And He's given us faculties, He's given us senses, He's given us perfection in our fitrah internally, but in our bodies also, so that we can worship Him. The author is now saying, وَمِنَ الْأَمْثِلَةِ تَنْظِيمُ الْعَلَاقَاتِ الْعَامَّةِ, social life, how Islam comes to organize social life. And he gives the first example is that Islam is a communal religion. الاجتماع على العبادات يوميا وأسبوعيا وسنويا, that we have unity, communal acts of worship on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, and on a yearly basis. And this is a perfection which started more than 1400 years ago, and it will continue, like we said, as long as Allah wills. And this shows us the perfection of this religion. And the author gives examples of how we have 5 daily prayers, and we have, Salatul Jumu'ah, and then we have Ramadan, and we have Eid, and we have the Hajj, etc. All of this shows us a very important point of the perfection of this religion is that this religion calls to unity. It doesn't call for people to split. It doesn't call for people to break off. It actually calls the opposite. It says, no, we need to love each other. We need to show compassion to each other. We need to be united. We need to benefit each other. We need to mix with each other. We need to socialize with each other. If you have advice for your brother, advise him. And Allah knows best. I don't know if there's any other religion which does it in the way that Islam does it. On a daily basis, 5 times. You meet your brother in the mosque 5 times. Ask him how he is. Give him salam. No other religion. The author then goes on to talk about social life, and he says, Wujub al-adl. Islam establishes wa huwa isal al-haq. So now he is saying that justice is an obligatory act of worship upon every single Muslim. Every single Muslim, whether you're old or young, male or female, whether you live in the East or you're living in the West, whether you speak Arabic or you don't speak Arabic, being just is a religious obligation upon every single Muslim. You cannot lie. You've done something haram. And according to the level of justice you have, that's the closer you become towards Allah. And the least amount of justice that you have, the further you come from Allah. Is there any other religion which will show you that level of perfection, that you have to be just? Some of the ulama have also said that the level of justice goes down to even the way you behave and you treat your own body. Therefore, you can't have one part of your head shaved and the other part of your head shaved. How would you look? They say you are defacing the way you look yourself. You are not being just to yourself. And there are other narrations where the Prophet ﷺ said we are not allowed to walk on one shoe because you are not keeping justice on your own body. These are just small examples, but the Shaykh is saying here, wujub al-adl, that we need to be just. And Allah says in the Quran, i'dilu huwa aqrabu lit-taqwa, be just. This is closer towards taqwa. What is taqwa? Doing the right thing. Doing the thing that Allah wants you to do and staying away from the thing that Allah doesn't want you to do. And when you have taqwa, Allah loves you. You get closer towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is a religion of social establishment of justice. And Islam does that. And this is like we were saying in the beginning before, we have Muslims who are not just, but then that puts a bad reflection on the religion of Islam. Is that fair? That is not fair. And even the kuffar who have a level of justice and a level of common sense and intellect, they will say, no, this person doesn't represent his religion. But that's besides the point. Islam is telling us that it's an obligation religiously for us to be just. And the Shaykh is now describing what is justice. He says, وَهُوَ إِيصَالُ الْحَقِّ إِلَى الْمُسْتَحَقِّ, that the person establishes and gives the truth to the person who deserves that truth. So if Isa ibn Maryam is not the son of God, then we cannot, I'm very sorry, you're my friend, you're my non-Muslim neighbor, you're my non-Muslim relative, but it's a religious obligation for me to say the truth. This is just one example. There are plenty of examples, but we establish truth and justice with good manners, of course, with good behavior, make them understand, not that we insult them and on purpose, irritate them and offend them. That's not the point, because that's not justice. Social justice. The third establishment of perfection in social life that Islam brings, wujub as-sidq wal wafa bil ahd. The Shaykh is saying here that it is a religious obligation, stemming on from this one is similar, but he's saying it is a religious obligation for us to be truthful. It is a religious obligation for us to be truthful. It is a religious obligation for us to keep our word, to say what we will say that we would do. If you signed a contract in your workplace, you're going to abide by that. You're not going to come late. You're not going to take away people's haqq without a due right. If the law enforcement in this country say don't park on double yellow lines, then do not park on double yellow lines. And if you do that for the sake of Allah, that is you establishing Allah's religion on earth. Something as simple as that. And this shows you the perfection. And I was speaking to one of our mashayikh once, and I've given this example before, and he was saying he didn't realize he didn't have his seatbelt on. So he put his seatbelt on when he was at the traffic light. because he was reminded by the car next to him. He looked over there and the non-Muslim had his seatbelt on. And he said, you know what the difference between our seatbelt and their seatbelt is? What's the difference? We get reward for it. We're doing it for the sake of establishing ikhlas. He didn't say like establishing the religion, but this is what we are doing. But he's not doing it for the sake of establishing the religion. He's just doing it to follow the law. Now, if he can take his seatbelt off, this is just an example. Maybe there could be other examples, but if he could take his seatbelt off and get away with it and the police won't catch him, would he do it? There's nothing stopping him. But would you do it? Allah is a Sami al-Basir. Allah is going to reckon you, and He's the Malik Yawmiddin, and there is something that will stop you, even if nobody else is looking. Therefore, the Shaykh is saying here, وُجُوبُ الصِّدْقِ وَالْوَفَاءِ بِالْعَهْدِ. If you are going to say you're going to do something, if you are living in a country, if you're living in social life, you are going to uphold the rights of other people and be truthful in that, even if people are not looking, even if you can get away with it. وُجُوبُ الْوَفَاءِ بِالْعُقُودِ. This is the same thing. This is all stemming on from what he was saying initially of adl. But in the fourth example that he is giving is honoring the agreements and the contracts that you have said that you would do. And the dalil for all of these, of at least point number 3 and 4, Allah says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu awfu bil uqud. O you people who believe, the people of faith, the people of perfection, fulfill your agreements. Allah also says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu taqullah, fear Allah, do the right thing. Stay away from what is haram. وَقُونُوا مَعَ الصَّادِقِينَ. And be with those people who are truthful. Be with those people who have that perfection. The fifth example of Islamic social life, he is saying, rahimahullah, al-hathu ala kull. In this one, it's similar to what he was saying before, but basically what he is saying here, that it is upon every single person who is a Muslim living in society, that he creates mawadda wa ulfa bayn al-muslimin, that he creates love and unity and compassion between the Muslims. Because the Prophet ﷺ said, لا تدخلون الجنة حتى تؤمنوا, you will never enter Jannah until you believe. ولا تؤمنوا حتى تحابوا, you will never believe until you love one another. So you will not get into Jannah until you become compassionate. You will not get into Jannah until you are creating a level of love and goodness, and you are spreading goodness. And because the Shaykh is talking about a Muslim country, because the Shaykh is talking about a Muslim country, he's talking about between the Muslims. However, we can extend that to living in a non-Muslim country, that we spread goodness and justice and friendship and compassion and unity and love, etc. Based on what? Based on justice. The Shaykh then goes on to talk about certain things, like we've seen in economics. He said that you should be doing X, Y, and Z in your economics, and you shouldn't be doing certain things because that will remove the perfection of Islam. He's saying the same thing here about social interactions of Muslims in society. So he said, rahimahullah, that there are certain things that Islam has come to say, do not do these, because then the perfection within society, of a Muslim society, or Muslims living within society, will then be reduced, or it will cease. It won't be there anymore. So he said, rahimahullah, the first thing, فَحَذَرْ or فَحَذَرْ مِنَ الظُّلْمِ. فَحَذَّرَ مِنَ الظُّلْمِ, should I say. Islam has come to warn against oppression. قال تعالى, Allah says in the Quran, وَاللَّهُ لَا يُحِبُّ الظَّالِمِينَ. Allah does not like and He is not pleased with the people who are oppressive. Therefore, when you're living in society, you cannot be oppressive. What is justice? What is oppression? They're the opposite. So justice is to give the people their due. If that is right, if he is right, then you have to give it to him, whether he's your friend or not, whether he's Muslim or not. Oppression is when you are not giving justice to people. So the Shaykh is saying, in society, the perfection of Islam can be seen through us not engaging with things which are dhulm. The second example that he gives is treachery, and this is the opposite of justice and being truthful, etc. وَنَهَا عَنِ الْغَدَرِ. Islam came to prohibit treachery. Allah says in the Quran, وَلَا تَنْقُضُوا الْإِيمَانَ بَعْدَ تَوْكِيدِهَا. And do not be treacherous with your word once you have given it and you have made an agreement. So Allah is telling us not to be treacherous in the Quran. If you be treacherous, then there will be social problems. And then the perfection will be lost. Then the nur will be lost, the guidance will be lost. There will be darkness, there will be oppression, and there will be chaos. The third example that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us in this religion, وَحَذَّرَ مِنَ الْكَذِبِ, that this religion has come warning against lies. All of these are opposites, if you can see the correlation. So now he's saying truthful is the opposite of lying. So إِيَّاكُمْ وَالْكَذِبُ, the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, be wary and be cautious of lying. فَإِنَّ الْكَذِبِ يَهْدِي إِلَى الْفُجُورِ, because when you start lying, you start becoming immoral. Your perfection goes down. You start doing things which are not good. وَإِنَّ الْفُجُورِ يَهْدِي إِلَى النَّارِ, and when you start doing that, you are now on a path going to where? To the hellfire. وَمَا يَزَالُ الرَّجُلُ, and as long as this man continues in lying, bad deeds, lying, وَمَا يَزَالُ الرَّجُلُ يَكْذِبُ وَيَتَحَرَّى الْكَذِبُ, as long as he continues, and he wants to continue in that way, حَتَّى يُكْتَبَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ كَذَّابًا, until it is written with Allah that this person is branded a liar. Branded in his heart, in his soul, with Allah, liar. Therefore Islam has come to eradicate that from you. There is still tawbah for that person, it can still change, but because that person is leaving that perfection for himself, when you have more people like that in society, what's going to happen? It's going to be more darkness. The Shaykh also gives an example that Islam came to remove any kind of disunity. وَنَهَا عَنْ كُلِّ مَا يُوجِبْ الْعَدَاوَةِ وَالتَّفَرُّقِ, anything which will create enmity and hatred and disunity. يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, O you who believe, لَا يَسْخَرْ قَوْمٍ مِّن قَوْمٍ عَسَىٰ أَن يَكُونَ خَيْرًا مِّنْهُمْ, do not mock one another. It could be that the people that you are mocking are better than you. وَلَا نِسَاء مِن نِسَاء عَسَىٰ أَن يَكُونَ خَيْرٌ مِّنْهُنَّ, that they could be better than. وَلَا تَلْمِزُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ, do not create nicknames. وَلَا تَنَابَزُوا بِالْأَلْقَابِ, do not insult one another, do not create nicknames. بِئْسَ الْإِسْمُ الْفُسُوقُ بَعْدَ الْإِيمَانِ, what a terrible, immoral way after Allah has shown you what perfection in Iman is. وَمَنْ لَمْ يَتُبْ فَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الظَّالِمُونَ, if people continue in that way, they will be oppressive. Then Allah says in the next ayah, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا, again, more perfection Allah is giving us. Do not go into anywhere that will create disunity. One of those things, اجتنبوا كثيرا من الظن, do not be suspicious about one another. Do not have bad thoughts about one another. Purify yourself. إِنَّ بَعْدَ الظَّنِّ إِثْمٌ, because some of these thoughts come from something where there is no substance, and it's going to create a sin. وَلَا تَجَسَّسُوا, do not spy on one another. وَلَا يَكْتُبْ بَعْضُكُمْ بَعْضًا, do not backbite one another. And the ayah then goes on to talk about different things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us to remain united on. Now, one of the biggest problems that we have in our society today is that disunity is actually celebrated. And there are so many, actually every single part of your life, the society that we're living in, is either pleased with disunity, or creates disunity, or doesn't do anything to sort out disunity. And this is what I think is happening. This is my own personal view. So now, for example, let's look at our family lives. And we're going to get to that just now. That's the next point. Look at our family lives. Islam has come to have the mother and the father and the children, and they respect, and then it's their religious duty to give them education, etc. When the father is not doing that, when the mother is not doing that, when we inject into this family lifestyle problems, maybe it's alcohol, maybe it's gambling, maybe it's mobile phones, maybe it's something like sports, entertainment and football and things like that, maybe it's work and their drive for their careers, etc., they start moving apart slightly. I mean, you'll never find the time from the Salaf, Allah knows best, that they only see their children for 1 hour a day. Half an hour. Where's the tarbiyah? 1 hour a day. Where's the tarbiyah? You see them breakfast, you see them after school, and that's it. And then they're going back to sleep. You're at work. Where is that in the Islamic model? So now, disunity is everywhere. Disunity is absolutely, it's there now. Politics, it's even there now with people creating crime with one another because of this disunity. We have gangs, we have all those things. And then we have things under the name of entertainment where there is disunity. So people start arguing with one another about football and about sports and things like that. And then they stop talking to one another and they start even fighting. You find hooliganism and people even being killed because of people celebrating disunity. Islam says that needs to stop. If you want to have a good, stable, perfect society, that is not the way. And Islam, we've just given examples, plenty of them, where Islam says this is the imperfection of man. So what we have learned so far is that this religion is teaching us a very important principle, which is that you can only really have perfection and true stability in this world if you have a religion which combines a person working for productivity and benefit and goodness and truthfulness and justice in the dunya for the sake of what? The akhirah. If you're doing it for the dunya alone, then the objective will not be achieved. And if you're working for the akhirah alone without living for the dunya, then perhaps even the akhirah will not be achieved. And this is similar to what we were seeing from the people of the book before. Some people, they had ilm but they didn't have action, so they led a life living for the life of the dunya alone. Or then you had people working for the akhirah, or that's what they thought, they were working for the akhirah, but they left the dunya. They created monasteries and monkship, don't know what is it. You know what I mean. They created different ways of worship where there is no ilm and they're working for the akhirah alone. Islam is saying, no, you need to work for the dunya to make your akhirah. You need to have perfection in the dunya to have perfection in the akhirah. And with this, you can have the goodness of the deen being established for you, because the religion needs to be established with perfection here, so that you can have a better place in the akhirah. Do you get that point now? Right. The next point that the Shaykh goes on to now, وَالْإِسْلَامُ كَامِلٌ فِي السِّيَاسَةِ. So now we've just looked at social life. And there's a lot more that we can say about that. So we can talk about dress codes, we can talk about lowering the gaze, but like we've said, that is a discussion that would need to happen in a separate arena, because this book, like we said, needs to be developed much more. But now the Shaykh is going on to the next topic, which is talking about politics. And the Shaykh quotes Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah. He said, وَمَنْ لَهُ ذَوْقٌ فِي الشَّرِيعَةِ وَإِطْلَاعٌ عَلَى كَمَالِهَا. Anybody who has tasted the Sharia, who has any kind of interaction with the Sharia, and he knows about the perfection of the Sharia, then he will quickly learn that its purpose is to create masalih, is to create betterment and to establish goodness and to establish all of this perfection that we have talked about. So now, politics is a very important part of Islam, because without politics you will not have aqeedah. Without politics you will not have worship. Without politics you won't have good stable economics. You won't have good stable social life. So this is very important. So this is what the Shaykh is saying here. تبين له أن السياسة العادلة جزء من أجزائها. And then he goes on to say that, part of the perfection of Islam is to make sure that we have a good, stable government that can help us to have a good, stable home life and domestic life and social, etc. The Shaykh then goes on to say that politics is based on 5 important aspects. Number 1, the head of state. Who is the head of state? What are his duties? Number 2, so number 1 is al-hakim, and the second one, al-mahkum, the citizens, the civilians, the people living in the country. So this is very important, because Islam is saying now, even the civilians in the country are part of the politics that is in that country. And this is something that democracy wants, but doesn't always get that relationship. But Islam is saying, no, there is a relationship between the government and the citizens, and there's a good, healthy relationship, as he will explain. The third one is social life. حفظ القيم الأخلاقية. And the manners within it. So now here we can say, حفظ الأمن as well, like he's saying. So now, 3 and 4, 3 social stability, and 4 manners and values. And number 5, al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa nahy al-munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil. And what we can say, this could possibly be translated into English now in saying that this is law enforcement. Law enforcement, living by the laws of the country. These are the 5 parts of Islamic politics which is saying that you need to have in order to have perfection. So now he goes into detail. So number 1, what is the role of head of state? The Shaykh said, rahimahullah, that the head of state needs to have 2 very important characteristics. Number 1, an-nush fil hukm, that he is very sincere in the legislation process, he is sincere in the laws that he is establishing, he is sincere in his role as head of state. And what that sincerity means is that he is going to spread goodness in society based on the Kitab of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah says in the Quran, "Inna Allah ya'murukum an tu'addu amanat ila ahliha." That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded that we give the people their rights. And part of that, the Shaykh is saying, rahimahullah, that a person chooses, or the person himself knows that he is appropriate. That is part of being sincere. And that he chooses people around him who are going to be appropriate also. So he's going to have ministers, he's going to have advisors, he's going to have people around him that are going to advise him about the Kitab of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and to take this responsibility seriously. That's the first thing. So sincerity is necessary for the head of state. The second thing is that al-adl bayn al-ra'iyya fi tanfidh al-ahkam Allah, that the person is just in the way he applies the laws. So there is no social difference in the way that the laws are being established. And this is unfortunate, because you'll find this in many even civilized countries and developed countries today, where there is a lot of corruption and oppression, where the people who are rich, they get away with stuff, but the people who are poor, they will get the brunt of it, and they will get, stop and search and all those different things, because they say that the minorities are most likely to be stopped and searched, etc. So now the Shaykh is saying here that part of Islamic politics and the perfection of it is that we have a sincere ruler, leader. He is sincere, he is qualified, he knows the Book of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. He has good religious understanding. He has people around him who are going to give him that also and carry that out for him also. But also when he does that, he's going to apply and establish the haqq with justice equally. The second part, the Shaykh is saying, وَظِيفَةُ الْمَحْكُومِ, what are the characteristics for the civilians living in that society? And the Shaykh gives 3 examples. Number 1, again, sincerity. Sincerity towards one another, but sincerity also towards the head of state. And part of that is that a person follows the laws. He advises if he sees something that is wrong. And then he creates brotherhood within that social setting. That's the first thing, the sincerity. The second thing is obedience, ta'ah, fi ghayri ma'siyatillah, that he obeys the ruler in whatever is not sinful, whatever is not against the Kitab of Allah and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah says in the Quran, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, ati'u Allah wa ati'u Rasul, wa ulil amri minkum. Obey Allah, obey His Messenger, obey the Messenger, and those people who are in authority over you. And this is again very important, because this is a point. And the third point also, so maybe mention the third point and then we'll mention the point I was just going to say. The third point the Shaykh is saying here, as-sabr ala dhulmihi wa jawrih. That if now you're living under a country and a government or a ruler who you think is oppressive, who you think is creating hardship for you, what do we do in that scenario? Do we revolt? Do we stop talking about him? Do we stop being sincere towards him? The Shaykh is saying no. The third aspect of you being an upright member in society and your relationship through Islamic politics for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is you have sabr in times of hardship, even if he is being oppressive towards you. So now with this we learn that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to obey Him, obey the Prophet ﷺ, and those people who are establishing on it. And if they are doing that, that's all well and good. But if they are not doing it, still we need to be patient. Now this is a big problem, because now people talk about politics in their own country, in different countries, and say, look at what this ruler is doing, look at what this government is doing, look at this Muslim government, why are they not doing X, Y, and Z? All of that is not part of the perfection of Islam. If you are able to change something, then change it. But by you talking about the honor of other people, even if they are oppressive, then that's not going to bring about any good. That's just going to create more resentment, it's just going to create more disunity. There's no point in talking about something that you cannot change. What's the point? So that's just going to create more ill feeling, and that's going to reduce the perfection of Islam. So the Shaykh is saying here, part of a person being an upright civilian and citizen, and it's from the aqeedah of Ahl Sunnah, is that we have sabr in times of oppression and in times of hardship, and we do not revolt. We do not start talking about the rulers. We do not start talking about governments and their policies. We just have sabr. And if a person has that, then he will see the tranquility and the contentment that people will have. Some people, and they talk about politics a lot, and then they get very frustrated because they can't do anything. Well, he's creating that frustration for himself. That's point number one. That's talking about international politics. But there's another thing which is now that we can relate to this, which is that if a person has somebody on top of him, whether he's a Muslim or a non-Muslim, and they are telling him to do something which is good, then you have to obey. And this is not talking about government level. This could be you in your workplace. It could be government. It could be local government, your council. Anybody who is telling you to do something which is upright and good and is not telling you to do something which is sinful, then you have to, especially if they are in authority, obey them. And this has become a problem for Muslims, because now what we do is we think acts of worship are just praying salah and siyam and those kind of things, but then we are not obeying the laws, and we are not being responsible, and we are not being sensible, and we are not sticking to our word. So you will find, unfortunately, Muslims having disciplinaries at work. If you get a disciplinary at work, what does that mean? Does that mean that you have done something against your workplace, or is it something greater than that? It is possibly that something that you have done which is part of your iman that you have created for yourself, that you've got that disciplinary against your manager. You keep coming late. You're not hitting your targets. You're being lazy. You're not doing your work properly. If your grades are falling at school or university, why is that happening? Is it because I'm not listening to my teachers? All of these things come under this principle, is that if there is somebody on top of authority with you, your parents, all of these, if there is a lack of following of that authority, what will happen is they will create a weakness in the people who are underneath that authority. Then the perfection will be lost. When that perfection reduces, iman will reduce. When iman reduces, what happens? Good deeds will increase, bad deeds will increase. So this is something which is very important. I know we're talking about, probably thinking about international politics, but no, this principle now is talking about anybody who is in authority. So when he is talking about the hakim, the person who is the ruler, that is anybody who is in authority. That's me and you. You're a hakim to some degree. You're the hakim of your house, over your children, over your business if you've got a business. And then if you are not, then you are either the hakim or you're the mahkum. You are the one that is underneath who is being ruled. And when you have those principles that the Shaykh is saying here, then you'll have a level of perfection and understanding. And if there is something that is wrong, then advise. Try and keep that stability and that unity, but remove and make an understanding and remove that barrier. The Shaykh then goes on to the third point, which is manners and having morals and values. وَالْقِيَمْ الْأَخْلَاقِيَّةِ وَالْقِيَمْ الْأَخْلَاقِيَّةِ. And this is the third part of having established politics. And how Islam brings perfection in its political strategies. Now, the Shaykh goes on to give examples of how Islam preserves manners. And if we look at these, all of the difficulty that we are seeing in the world today is because of the lack of all of them. And stability in the dunya is based on these being established. And this shows you the perfection of Islam. That if these were there, we would have a good healthy political environment. But if these are not there, then the government won't know what to do, and the citizens won't know what to do. And that's what we're living in one of the most developed countries in the world, here in the UK. So the Shaykh is saying, the first one, manners, is zina. And the reason why he is saying zina, because he says, for zina, hadam lil akhlaq, or hudima lil akhlaq. And it gets rid of people's manners, and it gets rid of people having honor towards one another. Wadiya al-ansab, and it removes any kind of kinship and responsibility towards your lineage. Zina brings about at least 3 negative aspects in politics and in society. it removes akhlaq. So if a person is a zani and he's going around from one woman to another, he's not going to treat them with respect. He's not going to look after them. He's not going to stay with them. He's not going to give them the emotional support. He's not going to have emotional support himself, perhaps. And then if they have children, children become broken. They come from a broken home. They don't know who the father is. Akhlaq is lost. He becomes very self-centered. He becomes very desired-based because all of his desires are being fulfilled. Manners are lost. He doesn't care about anybody else. And then that replicates itself. Then he goes around boasting. I'm doing this, here's my selfie, and here's my profile, and all of that. And people think, yeah, I want to be like him. They're having fun every day. Akhlaq is lost. And you don't have to go far. You can only see a woman who has been the result of zina 5-10 years later when she becomes pregnant, when she has a child by herself and she's struggling. And she didn't look the way she used to look on that night when he did it to her and he is gone. She doesn't have time to look beautiful anymore. She doesn't have anyone to look beautiful for anymore. And now she's stuck with a child. The child, maybe he's problematic himself because he doesn't have a father. Sometimes they have disabilities, etc., especially if they're taking intoxicants and alcohol and cigarettes, etc., and the child comes out with a disability. So then she's got added, being a single parent, she's got an added problem where she has to deal with disabilities and poverty and things like that. Akhlaq is lost when it comes to zina. But the Shaykh is also talking here, وَهَتْكُ لِلْأَعْرَادِ, and it also gets rid of people's honor for one another. And with that, وَدِيَا الْأَنْصَابِ, and then the lineage is lost. The second example, and this is very controversial, عُقُوبَ اللِّوَاطِ. Al-uquba al-liwat. The punishment for homosexuality. Islam, obviously we know, doesn't approve of homosexuality, and this is something which is very important, especially because it's going to become part of the curriculum. And we need to make people understand. We need to make ourselves understand first and foremost, but we need to make our children understand that the reason why Islam is against homosexuality is actually against any kind of sexuality which is outside of marriage. So if a man is with a man, or a woman is with a woman, or if a man is with a woman, if it is not done through the nikah process, then it ends up in point number 1, which is zina, which manners are then lost, honor is lost, and lineage is lost. Those 3 very important points. But why we are talking about homosexuality in particular here is that because Islam believes that the man has a role. And if there are 2 men, then the role of the man will get lost. Either they will start competing, or they both lose it, or one will have it and the other one won't have it. And then, the biggest problem that Islam has come to promote with homosexuality is the reproduction. Man obviously cannot produce with another man, and a woman can't produce with another woman, so then it becomes a problem in Islam, because Islam is saying, no, you need to get married, you need to have children, you need to look after your children so you can keep the human race going, and then we can keep a good society going. If people are homosexual, then how are we going to keep reproducing? So now this is the hikmah and this is the wisdom as to why Islam is not doesn't condone homosexuality. But at the same time we have to realize that we are not homophobic people. Homophobic means that you have a hatred towards homosexuals, or you have a dislike towards that person because he is homosexual. Now, we're living in a society which is a society of tolerance, and we're talking about the perfection of Islam. And the Prophet ﷺ dealt with people which were much worse than homosexuals, mushriks, oppressors, people who are having zina on a daily basis. They were gambling, they were dealing with intoxications, they were oppressing people, they were oppressing orphans. A little child they're oppressing. Nothing stopping them from that. The Prophet dealt with vile people, very vile people. Some people were worse than animals. Allah talks about that in the Quran. The way that they've become so stubborn. But how did he deal with it? Did he deal with it so that he can annoy them and insult them and offend them? Again, this is not about offending anyone. Yes, Islam doesn't say that you should have a homosexual relationship, just like you shouldn't have a heterosexual relationship outside of marriage. Islam's saying get married. If you've got desires and you want to get married to the person that you're interested in, look after them, let them look after you, and create a good family home. That's what Islam is saying. But if you want to choose that for yourself, if you want to be homosexual, we are not against you in that. That is your right living in this country. So we need to make people understand that. But the problem is now, like we've said, there's a difference between Islam and Muslims. Where you have Muslims going outside of schools shouting homosexual or homophobic messages. There's one man with a big beard and a turban and everything, and he said, doesn't even make any sense. He said, homosexuals are pedophiles. Doesn't even make any sense. Homosexuals are pedophiles. They're two separate things. And he was saying, homosexuals are pedophiles. Don't make our children into pedophiles. And he's trying to talk against, the SRE changes. So it doesn't make any sense. That's not the Islamic way of dealing with it. And now we can see the difference between Islam and the Muslims. So we have to be very clear that we are not homophobic. We don't hate homosexuals. They are human beings. And we want them to understand what we believe, but he has his rights and we have our rights as well. We have our views, they have their views. And even if we disagree, we are not going to be insulting towards them. We don't have a dislike towards that person. We don't have any hatred, and we certainly don't have any violence or condone any violence towards any other civilian. The third example that he gives of manners within society, uquba al-khamar. Wal-khamar kullu muskir. The Shaykh is saying the punishment is here in Arabic. I think that's a very strong word. But Islam comes to condemn intoxications. And intoxication condemns alcohol. And alcohol or intoxication or anything which clouds the judgment. And the reason why Islam says that intoxication is haram, and if people start on a wide basis in society start dealing with intoxications, number one, their intellect and their common sense will be challenged. It will affect your intellect. There is no doubt about that. You could be a very intelligent person, but the more you get drunk, there will be problems. I actually know of a person in Saudi Arabia. This man, he's a non-Muslim, and he came from a non-Muslim country, and the university that was working in there had employed this man, to be the head, because he had, I don't know how many PhDs, 2-3 PhDs. The country that he came from, he was actually a celebrity in his own field. He was very, very well recognized. He used to come on the radio, and if there was anything they wanted his opinion on, if there's a discussion, public discussion, they will call him and he'd come on the radio and those kind of things. This man, they employed him in Saudi Arabia. Allah knows best how high his salary is, but I'm pretty sure it's a very, very good salary. 10,000, 20,000 pounds a month. Easy. But this man, he had a problem. What was his problem? Drinking. He couldn't stop drinking. So every weekend, there's no alcohol in Riyadh, not one drop. So every weekend, he used to go, get a flight, go to Dubai or something, and then come back. And in the beginning of the week, you'd always see him hangover. Throughout the week, he's fine. But the thing is with him, he was addicted. So what he would do, you would find him all of a sudden acting very funny in the middle of the road, in his home, in the workplace, the way he used to come to work sometimes. And everybody kind of knew that this man, he was addicted to alcohol. And then the university found out about it, until one day he did something at the airport or in the workplace publicly in front of thousands of people. It was terrible. I can't even repeat in the house of Allah. That's how drunk he was. But this man is a very, very intelligent person. Very intelligent. When he is sober, you speak to him, you think, wow, he is intelligent. But what happened to his intellect? Because he was addicted to intoxication, he lost it. He lost his job. They got rid of him. Then you will end up, the Shaykh is saying, your intellect decreases, and then your actions will be actions that will cause remorse and regret. Just like this example. But for the Muslim, this is non-Muslims, there's a third ingredient or third element to this for the Muslim, which is that what would happen to your acts of worship? What would happen to your iman? What would happen to the purpose that you exist for? You're going to come to the house while you're drunk? Before you're drunk? After you're drunk? How does it work? Therefore Islam is saying, no, in order for you to be a good, responsible human being, preserve your dignity, preserve your manners, don't do zina, and don't get drunk. The Shaykh then explains that these are things which will destroy social morals. And even if we don't see it, let's look at the truthfulness of the Shaykh. Even if we don't see it straight away, you will see it after some time. So you have 10 years of people allowing, the government allowing people to intoxicate themselves and to fornicate and to get into adultery, and it's not a sin anymore, and they lift those rules and laws. After 10 years, no change. After 20 years, no change. The Shaykh is saying, even after some time, you will see that it will have an impact on your society. And this is true. After the Second World War, we went through a change in this country, and we created a lot of advancements, but at the same time, we became very relaxed as a country with intoxications and zina and adultery and fornication. And now, we are roughly 70 years after that. Look what's happening. The Shaykh is saying now, the fourth part, should I say, of the political framework of perfection of Islam, وَحِفْظُ الْأَمْنِ, that Islam came to preserve security. Now security, we're talking about you being safe, but also security in your intellect. So security, you being safe in your blood and in your wealth, your physical body, as in your blood and your wealth, but also in your intellect and in your religion and in your family, in the things that you belong to. So Islam came to preserve all of those things, and this is what we mean by security. And then the Shaykh goes on, the Shaykh gives examples, but we're going to go through them very quickly. But then the Shaykh goes on in saying that if crime goes up and it continues going up and it is not punished and it is not challenged, so if you have more intoxications and people are letting it happen but there's nothing being done about it, if poverty is going up, if unemployment is going up, if homelessness is going up but nothing is happening about it, and crime is going up and none of it is being challenged, the Shaykh is saying here, what will happen is that this will create imperfection and it will create chaos. And this adds to the perfection of Islam, because Islam has a set penal code, a way that it establishes the law so that security can remain within society. And we all know, and the Shaykh is giving an example here of cutting the hand of the thief. So sometimes a sin or a crime would lead to amputation. Sometimes a sin would lead to lashing. And sometimes a sin could lead to penalties, just financial penalties. Sometimes a sin would lead to exile, that we put him somewhere else for a little while. And sometimes a sin can lead even to death. Now this is a very important point, because people will say, look, your laws are barbaric. If somebody steals, you cut his hand off. That's so backward. And you're saying that Islam is perfect. Well, there's 2 points with that. The Shaykh is saying, if people knew, then you wouldn't have that problem in society. And like again, going to example of Saudi Arabia, you leave your car on and you go into the mosque. People sometimes they don't even switch their car off. In the ignition. Go pray and you come back, the car's still running. But if you switch it off, the car gets so hot and you sit back in the car. Leave it running. Shops open, go pray. And this is something, I'm not saying it which is strange, I'm sure everybody's witnessed this before. Why is that there though? Why is that there? It's because they know, number one, Iman is there in society. And number two, there are strict laws. And with those laws, security can then remain. So that's the first point. That's why we need to have strict laws. But the second thing is, and this is the thing that a lot of Muslims don't understand, let alone non-Muslims, which is that they say, look, your religion says do this and that, and you need to stone and you need to kill people, etc. No, that's not necessarily the case. What's the punishment for apostasy? Death. There were more than one incident on the day of Fath when the Prophet ﷺ liberated Mecca, that we had apostates in Mecca, but the Prophet ﷺ didn't kill them. Had it been that the ruler has to kill any crime that says he must be killed for, then the Prophet ﷺ would have killed them. But he didn't. Therefore, what we learn with this is that these are a framework that Allah has given us in the Quran. Some things there will be amputation. Some things there will just be lashing. Some things there will be financial penalty. Some things they will just get told off and carry on. Sometimes you will be exiled. Sometimes you'll be put in prison, and some things you'll be killed for. If somebody kills another person unjustly and it's established that he has done murder, then it is eye for an eye, and you find that in the Old Testament and the New Testament. But does that mean it has to happen? No. Because the ruler and the qadi can decide, well, in this scenario we're not going to do that. And the last thing needed, or the last component here of Islamic politics, which shows us the perfection of Islam, is law enforcement and people living by these laws. And like we've said here, it's classed as amr bil ma'ruf and nahy anil munkar, enjoining good and forbidding evil. But we're talking about law enforcement. Law enforcement meaning that we are making sure good happens in society and bad doesn't happen in society. And there is a structure put down to make sure, a system put down to make sure that that goes and that happens. And the Shaykh gives an example that this can happen internally and it can happen externally. So it could be internal politics and it can be international politics. As for the internal one, we've just looked at examples of that, where we keep manners together, we have certain laws and we put down certain, and this is down to the ruler to think of different ideas to make sure that people are learning and people are upholding it, and the ruler himself has to be educated, he needs to be scholarly and he needs to have scholars around him, he needs to have good ministers, etc., and the citizens need to obey, etc., all of those things. So that's all the internal. But what about the external? What about the international policies? This is very important, because the Shaykh is talking about Islam, but it's, very difficult for anybody to find any kind of time in human history to find the world in the way it is today back then, where you have so many people from a country that they don't belong to, but they live in that country now. Because back then you had Europeans living in Europe, and you had Persians living in Persia, you had Arabians living in Arabia, you had Africans living in Africa, and you had, that's it, that's how it was. And you'd have a few people or a small minority migrating there and then maybe coming back at some stage, but not staying there permanently. But now it's become very, very mixed, very, very mixed. We are all British here, but all of our nativity and all of our asl comes from somewhere else. So this point is very important. The Shaykh says international policies and politics. Islam looks at the international politics in three ways. Number one, القسم الأول كفار محاربين. We need to have a strategy and a relationship with those people who are the enemies of the Muslim country. So we're talking about politics, we're talking about Muslim country. What does it mean by enemy? Enemy meaning, now this is very important. This is very, very important, because now we have extremists in this country and abroad who say that anybody who is not Muslim, he is a muharib, he is an enemy straight away. But that's not correct. Because the Shaykh is saying here, and we will find plenty of dalil for this also, Islam says no. If there is a person that you are not friends with, and this is now also on our own individual level, there's a person who hates you because you're a Muslim. There's a person who doesn't like you, whether because you're a Muslim or not, doesn't matter. What do you do? What does Islam say you must do in that scenario? Talk to them. Try and make them understand. Try remove that problem. Create a dialogue, create a conversation. So if you have a person who's a racist and he's shouting at you, he doesn't like Muslims and he's shouting all of these things, and some of it, most of it's not true anyway. So you don't need to get angry. What do you need to get angry for? Because half the stuff he's based his stuff on lies. So you explain to him. It's not true. What you're saying is not true. Let me explain it to you. Give me a chance to speak. And then that's it. And a lot of the time, you will probably find that person calming down. And this is exactly the case when it comes to people who internationally are against the Muslim countries. So say you've got a Muslim country, you've got another non-Muslim country, they do not like this country, and the first thing that the Prophet ﷺ did, such as on the day of Khaybar, he sent Ali with a message before they were going to go to war, and he said, take this and call them to Islam. And if even one person becomes a Muslim, خَيْرٌ لَكَ مِنْ هُمُرِ النَّعَمِ, this is better for you than even red camels. So he sent Ali with a parchment with da'wah, and he went to Khaybar, and he was outside Khaybar, and he said, listen, we're calling you to Islam, we're calling you to goodness, we don't want to fight, we don't want a war. This is after years and years and years of these people even trying to assassinate the Prophet ﷺ himself. Despite that, he said, no, let's try and have an understanding here. I know you tried to kill me loads of times, but let's forget about that. So this is very important. That Islam, part of the perfection of Islam is Islam doesn't want to create violence. It doesn't want to create war. And as some of the ulama, the Salaf said that this is the problem of the Khawarij and the extremists, is that they want to kill everybody. If they've killed everybody, who is left to worship Allah? Allah's created you and me as Muslim, but He's also created John and Peter upon a fitrah. Allah's created him. He didn't come from nowhere. Iblis didn't make him. Allah is the one who has created him. Therefore, Allah has brought him into existence for what? To worship Him. So speak to him. Give him a chance. Make him understand. So the first thing that a person does is they create that interaction. If not, and if it goes to warfare, then Islam has rulings for warfare. And one of the biggest ones that we're not going to go into right now is that you cannot kill people unjustly. You can't kill innocent people. You can't kill people who don't have arms. You can't kill people who are not on the battlefield, etc. And those are all rulings when it comes to jihad, which we're not talking about right now. But the first point here, when it comes to international politics, one of the policies we have is towards those people who do not have a treaty with us, and they don't want a treaty with us. So we call them muharibin. They are the enemies. And again, that's a very strong word. I don't like using that word, but that is just to make us understand that first category. The second category are those people who we have an agreement with. Now, the ulama have mentioned that this is the state of the dunya today. Why? Because there is no Muslim country who doesn't have a treaty or an agreement with a non-Muslim country. It doesn't exist. All the countries around the world today have an agreement with one another. I mean, you'll find maybe a few exceptions, but definitely with the UK and with USA and the European countries, there is no such thing that Saudi Arabia has enmity towards the UK. Therefore, it's going to send in their soldiers or spies and those kind of things and create terrorists in that country. And it doesn't exist. So the ulama of fiqh who are looking at this way, this is what they mean, is saying he's a faqih himself. But the second category is kuffar muahidun, those people we have an agreement, a treaty, a nationality, a visa, a law, an agreement, anything, a covenant with. So we have nationality, and in our nationalities that we need to obey that law. If you come into this country, you have a visa, that means you must obey the law. Therefore, this is the second category. And Islam, like the Shaykh is saying here, tells us that we must uphold those laws. وَلَا يَجُوزُ إِلْقَاؤُهُ قَبْلَ إِعْلَامِهِمْ. Shaykh is talking about it, and it is not permissible for anybody to cancel that treaty. It's not permissible, unless if it is done with a mutual understanding. So now imagine you've got a non-Muslim, and you've got a Muslim country. The Muslim country's got an agreement with the non-Muslim country. All of a sudden, the non-Muslim country says, we don't like you guys. We want to break our treaty, and we're going to become from the first scenario where we have enmity towards one another. That's possible. It happens within non-Muslim countries, let alone Muslim and non-Muslim. This is how politics is. So now Islam is saying, what do you do in that scenario? Is there a part of Islam, something which is so serious that Islam didn't tell us about? No, it is. It does. There is. Islam is saying here, in that scenario, this is what you do. Why? Because Islam is perfect. Islam is a guidance. Islam is a sirat al-mustaqim. Islam is irshad, and it's a way. So Islam is saying here now, no, create a treaty. Create an understanding. Create talking. If that doesn't work and it gets to war, then there are certain rules for war. We're not talking about that right now. But then create the treaty. And after, say they are being treacherous, or say they want to cancel it. You are not allowed to cancel it, not by yourself. But if they want to cancel it, then try and talk to them. Try and reconcile. But you yourself, you're not allowed to cancel it. What's the dalil for that? Hudaybiyah. The Prophet ﷺ went into a treaty for 10 years. They proved treacherous. What did the Prophet ﷺ do? All of a sudden, he could have just gone into Makkah and started killing everyone. But he didn't. You know what he did? He stretched it out. And then he sent Abu Bakr for Hajj and he said, listen, we're going to give you some time to leave. He didn't have to do that. We're going to give you some time to leave. What is that? What purpose does that bring about? That gives them now the chance to think. Allah says within the context of that, حَتَّى يَسْمَعْ كَلَامَ اللَّهِ, take him to the place of security and give him a chance so that he can hear the kalam of Allah. And the third scenario is where there is a treaty and there is a sulh and there is a protection, and the non-Muslim is agreed to give, the Muslim is agreed to give the non-Muslim protection. And this is known as Ahlul Dhimma. And these people will pay jizya. Is that fair? They have to pay a tax. And the Muslims don't have to pay a tax. we're paying the zakat. Therefore you're paying jizya, we're paying zakat. Call it what you want, we're all paying the same tax. And in return, they will be a normal citizen. And in return, they will get their full rights. And in return, they will be honored. And in return, we will look after them. And they will be part of a society that will live prosperously. So now, this is the end of the political paragraph that he was talking about here. And what we can see from this is that there is a great deal of wisdom and perfection in Islam. That Islam comes to remove any kind of oppression. And it comes to spread betterment. But at the same time, it gives us rules and standards to live by if we are a minority and we are living in a state of weakness. As a conclusion for the book, the Shaykh is saying, the Muslim must realize that he has certain favors that Allah has given to him through this religion. The Muslim has come as part of an ummah which is the best ummah that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has ever created. And from that best ummah, we are the people who have been guided. Therefore, the Muslim must have honor in his religion. He must be satisfied with his religion. He must really be thankful to Allah for the fact that Allah has given him an Islam. And if he takes that seriously, Allah will give him izzah and honor and superiority. He will show him the right way. Allah says in the Quran, وَلِلَّهِ الْعِزَّةُ وَلِرَسُولِهِ وَلِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ, and all izzah and honor belongs to Allah, to His Messenger, and to the believers. So the Shaykh is saying, as a final word of advice, be happy with your religion, because your religion is a religion of perfection. And don't be deluded and don't be disheartened by people who are saying anything otherwise. You have a perfection that a lot of people are looking for, but they don't know that it's there. The second thing he is saying, rahimahullah, is that you have an identity and do not lose that identity. Allah has given you perfection, so you need to keep that identity as you being a Muslim, because that is you being perfect. The third thing he says is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you a completion in all aspects of your life. Therefore, what you need to do is increase in that perfection and those ways of life, because this is Allah's favor upon you. Like He says in the ayah, Allah says, "Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum." Today we have perfected your religion for you. We have perfected. It's perfect now. Nothing wrong with it. Wa atmamtu alaykum ni'mati, and my favor has been completed. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has come. He's conveyed the message. Now he's going to leave. Now it's up to you. وَرَضِيتُ لَكُمْ الْإِسْلَامَ دِينًا, and I am pleased with you as Islam as your religion. If you hold on to that perfection, Allah will be pleased with you. But how can you do it? We need to gain an ilm, and we need to seek to improve on a regular basis. That's when we will see more perfection. The Shaykh is also saying that everything that we have in this perfect religion has come to abrogate anything else that was there before. So if there's any other religion, if there's any other belief, if there's any other theory that is existing in society today, you have to realize that what you have been given is solid and it is sound and it is secure and it is protected with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is nothing that's going to come as a new idea or a new theory except that this perfection has abrogated everything else. It has a solution for everything else. So if tomorrow there's a new theory and there's a new religion, no, Islam will deal with why that is false. And the final thing he says, rahimahullah, hold firm to this religion, and tamassuk bihi sababun lisa'at dunya wal akhirah. Allah will give you happiness in this world. He'll give you tranquility and blessings in this world, and more importantly in the akhirah. Allah says in the Quran, "Man amila salihan min dhakrin aw untha wa huwa mu'min," whoever does good deeds, male or female, and he is a believer, فَلْنُحْيَنَّهُ حَيَاةٌ طَيِّبًا, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give him a good life in the dunya. But the ayah doesn't stop there. وَلْنَجْزِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْرَهُمْ بِأَحْسَنِ مَا كَانُوا يَعْمَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward them for the best of what they did. Therefore, if you want stability, if you want happiness, if you want to have a good life, if you want your wife to be nice, if you want your children to be good and successful and upright, If you want yourself to go to a better place in the akhirah, gain more of this perfection. Learn more about it, be happy with it, increase in it. Because if you've got something which is perfect, how are you just going to take a little bit and then be happy with that? You need to gain more of it, so that you yourself get rid of and clean all of those things which are wrong with yourself. Ask Allah to give us iman, and that Allah perfects us, and He perfects our light of iman in this dunya and in the akhirah, and that He is pleased with us, with our statements and our thoughts and our actions and our manners, and that Allah helps us to remove our imperfections so that we can become perfect, and that Allah helps us to remove our weaknesses so that we can gain strength, and that Allah helps the Muslimin in every corner of the earth, and that Allah gives honor to the religion of Islam, and that Allah helps the people who are poor and being oppressed, and Allah helps the people who are weak and Allah gives them strength, and Allah helps those people who are financially weak and poor, and Allah gives them provisions and stability and betterment, and that Allah helps us all and enables us all, and Allah helps the future generations that are going to come and give them their religion and their identity and their perfection. هذا والله أعلم وصلى اللهم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Next week is the 28th, so I won't be here for that one, but we'll be back on the 4th, Saturday the 4th, after Salat al-Isha, 6:45. And we've had a few books now on Aqidah, so the next book we will do inshallah is Muhammad al-Uthaymeen rahimahullah, his book on Sifat al-Salah. So something on fiqh, where he is now going to describe according to what he thinks is the correct opinion in describing on how to pray correctly. So we'll resume our lessons bi'idhnillah on the 4th of January after Salat al-Isha 6:45. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.